legendary Alabama football coach and the coach that I think is the greatest college football coach of all time, Nick Saban, retired yesterday. And Florida can capitalize on that and build momentum for their program. We'll talk about that here on Locked On Gators.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts, and sometimes multiple times per day. Like yesterday, we went live twice and we had our normal show come out in the morning. We had our normal show. We went live when Nick Saban announced his retirement initially, and then we went live following the Ole Miss game. But now we're just talking normal here. I am Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Whole Nine Sports, Giants Country, and NFL 33. And if you're looking for last minute tickets to any event, a concert, whatever it is, well, guess what? Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. So download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. And I texted this to the subtext group last night. If you want to join in, it's joinsubtext.com/LockedOnGators. But I think that Florida can capitalize on the departure of Nick Saban. And we talked about this yesterday during the live stream. I do want to just for a couple minutes, I do want to talk about just Nick Saban because I do think that Nick Saban is the greatest college football coach of all time. I said this yesterday. Said this basically forever. I hate him, but I also recognize that he is one of, if not the greatest, which I think he's the greatest college football coach of all time. And the Florida kind of played an important part in him starting the Alabama dynasty, really, because the 2009 SEC championship, Florida and Alabama were both 12-0. Florida was, just everyone was like, all right, they're gonna be kings. And Alabama just demolished them 32-13. Florida had scored 60 points twice that year. They scored 40 and 50 kind of routinely. No team had scored more than 23 on them. And Alabama just decimated them. And I think for a lot of people, I'm not going to say me because I was 13 at the time. I didn't know anything. But I think for a lot of people, that was Nick Saban kind of planting his flag. And so I think that for me, at least, that's the moment where I think of Nick Saban as just, that's when he started taking control of college football. And he never really let it up until very recently. But even then, he's the only person to beat Kirby Smart since 2018. So, Nick Saban's the greatest coach of all time, in my opinion. And that's where I land. But for Florida, you can benefit from this. Like here's the important part. You have to be a bit more aggressive. And Florida has this portal season. They've been more aggressive than they have been in previous portal seasons under Billy Napier. Have they necessarily been aggressive? I wouldn't say that, but they've been more aggressive. And so I do think that Florida, like the door's open. You just have to get in there. But the door is open to go in and make some additions to your team, whether it's through high school players or the transfer portal. And by high school players, I do mean that a lot of kids have signed their letter of intent. But if you haven't enrolled and gone through the process and everything, you can request your release from your national letter of intent. And guess what? You can come out and come back and you can go somewhere else, which we'll talk about those in a second. But I did want to talk first about the transfer portal aspect of it, because I think that's obviously the more immediate impact way to go about things. And just some players that I'm looking at, and honestly, most of the guys that I'm looking at are on the defensive side of the ball. First off, I'm looking at Caleb Downs, which I know that Caleb Downs is a safety. I think he could play star. I think he's one of the most instinctual true freshmen that I've ever seen. And I'm not going to pretend that I've been covering college football for, a decade plus. I've been in media for about 6 years now. But Caleb Downs is the most instinctive true freshman that I think I've ever seen. He just makes plays, not just on defense, but on special teams. He makes high IQ plays that I don't think you can get anywhere else. And so for me, I'm looking at Caleb Downs as kind of the first name of that's who I want. Like Caleb Downs is a good enough football player where I'm looking at him and I'm saying, I don't care the amount of money that he wants. I'm giving him that amount of money. He would be the best safety on the team instantly. Better than Jordan Castell. Caleb Downs would be the best safety on the team instantly. If you want to play him at star, which I think he's capable of playing, he'd be the best option there probably. He's just a phenomenal football player. He runs the alley like no other true freshman does. Just he's so quick trigger to do everything. It's kind of incredible. So for me, Caleb Downs is like the guy that I'm looking at. I think he's the best true freshman safety, maybe the best true freshman football player in the country this year. So for me, Caleb Downs is one of the names that I'm looking at immediately. Another one that I think you have to look at would be Keon Key for Alabama. I think that he was one that, he was initially committed to Notre Dame, and then it was Florida got a visit, I believe, and then it was Ohio State got visits, and when he was committed to Notre Dame, he took visits elsewhere to Ohio State, and I believe he was at the game where Ohio State beat Notre Dame, and highest rated edge in the country last year. He didn't play for Alabama this year as is expected when you're a true freshman on the edge at Alabama. Just don't expect to see playing time. That's not something that you're gonna get. But Florida, you desperately need help on the edge. You have a guy who, yes, he would be a redshirt freshman, but guess what? That's not a true freshman. And anticipating that off the edge again, Tampa kid. That is just truly a when he was coming out of high school was the elite of the elite. Like everybody in the country wanted Keon Key to play for them. And of course, in Nick Saban fashion, Nick Saban got him. But for me, those are the two main guys that I'm looking at if I'm Billy Napier. No matter who I am, I'm looking at Caleb Downs in the secondary, and I'm looking at Keon Key off the edge. Again, Keon Key didn't play. I'm fully confident that he could step in and play immediately for Billy Napier and for Austin Armstrong and for Ron Roberts for this defense. Fully confident he could step in from day one. I'm also revisiting a guy like Quay Rousseau and James Smith, who were a package deal last season, for the 2023 recruiting class, a package deal, and they ended up going to, yes, Alabama, and Florida was very much in the running. It was like a deal where they kind of both wanted different things, and they ended up picking Alabama together because it was a spot where they could both agree to. But if I'm Florida, I'm knock. Parth, you're gonna hate this, but hey, big head, I'm hitting you up, and I'm trying to see if you want to come be a Gator. Whether or not you do is up to you. But James Smith and Quay Rousseau, both defensive linemen from Carver in Montgomery, Alabama, they were teammates, they were best friends, they were a package deal, and they actually stuck to that package deal. That package deal claim that they had that they were going together. But looking at just, again, the 2023 Alabama class, like you could look at Desmond Ricks at corner and you go, hey, Florida desperately needs help at corner. And I know that a lot of guys go to Alabama and they go, all right, well, that's where I'm going to go because Nick Saban is there. Nick Saban's not there anymore. And I'm fully expecting Alabama to make a quick hire so that they don't lose this incredible class. Because Yeah, Alabama's fallen off a little bit, but guess what? They've still been top 3 recruiting classes consistently. I think 2024 they were number 2, 2023 they were number 1. Like they've been still elite recruiters throughout the entire time. And so if I'm on this staff, I'm reaching out in some way, shape, or form that wouldn't get me in trouble for tampering. But I'm reaching out and I'm like, hey, like let's get something done. Let's add some of these impact players. Because a lot of these kids were recruited by Florida at one point or another. And you look at the 2024 class, you look at the 2023 class, they were recruited by Florida. And we'll talk about the 2024 class in a little bit because I do think that's an important part to talk about as well. But I do want to talk about offensive players as well from the Alabama side. We focus a lot on defense, and now we're going to talk about offense in just a minute. First, we're going to get a quick word from GameTime. The NFL playoffs are here, and the odds are there's a game being played at least relatively close to you. And if you want to get tickets to that, sorry, Jaguars fans, I know that sucked that they tweeted in like November the playoff tickets were on sale. That was rough. But if you want to get tickets at the last minute, go to GameTime. GameTime is the place for last minute ticket deals. You can get NBA games, concert tickets. There's everything on there. I went to Florida versus Arkansas, which broke my heart, using GameTime. The GameTime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. And if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. So download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off with GameTime. So download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts. And like I said, we're going to look at the offensive side of the ball for Alabama and who Florida can target. And the first name that I think has to come to mind would be wide receiver Isaiah Bond. Isaiah Bond this year had 75 targets for Alabama, 49 catches, 671 yards. Part of the 2022 class was at one point committed to Florida. Then things happened, of course. After that 2021 season, things happened where the 2022 recruiting class and Dan Mullen leaving and Billy Napier coming in. And Isaiah Bond ended up going to Alabama, didn't play much as a true freshman. But he is a Billy Napier kind of receiver. Like he's used in that way. Just give him the ball short, let him run after it like that. That's how he moves. That's how he operates. That's how he worked at Alabama. And he was a big part of Jalen Milroe's production, and a big part of Jalen Milroe being able to find success was just having Isaiah Bond there that he could just check it down, get going and get moving and make some big plays. And I think that for Florida, like you have to kick the tires there. You've been looking at a guy like CJ Daniels, and I know you're looking for more size in the transfer portal right now. But if you can add a guy like Isaiah Bond, you can add that speed. I get it. Size is going to be a concern in the receiver corps. Honestly, I think no matter who you add, size in general is going to be a concern in the receiving corps for Florida. So I'm looking at Isaiah Bond, and I'm like, yeah, 5'11", 182. That's the build that Florida's had success with. The Ricky Pearsalls are not big. The Eugene Wilson IIIs are not big receivers, but they get put in space in the offense and they find success, and they get moving in this offense and they find success. Imagine having a guy like Isaiah Bond on the field with Eugene Wilson III in 2024, when you're going to have Graham Mertz back and your offensive line is still very questionable. You're going to have to get the ball out quick. So you get a guy like Isaiah Bond who could play receiver, who you can use as a gadgety type of guy and let him run, and you find success that way. So I'm looking at Isaiah Bond. Like Isaiah Bond is the guy that I'm looking at, the most catches on Alabama. The most catches on Alabama this season. I know that it's not going to happen. I'll say that. I know it's not going to happen, but I'm kicking the tires on Kaden Proctor. Kaden Proctor in 2023 was Alabama's second highest rated commit. He was, I think, like he was top 10 in the country, just consensus wise. I think he was maybe even top 5. But the number one offensive tackle, he was out of Iowa. He was just a beast. There is no other way to put it. He was an absolute beast. He had offers from everyone and their mother. I thought he was going to wind up at Iowa for a bit. I know that Florida tried to get in with him, but I think Kaden Proctor is someone that you look at and you go, all right, hey, if we can get you, we can get you. He started the entire season at left tackle for Alabama, which is not an easy thing to do as a true freshman. Had his struggles without a doubt, but if I'm looking at the Florida tackle situation this year, you could still use some improvement. I get it. You added Devin Manuel. I've said it earlier this week. I was like, I still have my questions about him. So I'm not just going to chalk him as someone that's going to start immediately for Florida. I would bring in Kaden Proctor, and Kaden Proctor is the kind of guy that I would chalk as he's going to start immediately for Florida. I think that Alabama offensive line is not working the way they usually do, but I'm looking at Kaden Proctor as someone that can contribute. I'm looking at their running back room, and I'm saying, hey, is there anybody in there that can come in and contribute to Florida? Because again, and I know so many people just vehemently disagree with me about needing to add a running back through the transfer portal. Well, guess what? Florida didn't. And to this point still has not. But why not give Justice Haynes a call? Like just kick the tires on him. There's players, this Alabama roster is incredibly talented and has so many guys that can hit the transfer portal. So I'm looking at Justice Haynes and I'm saying, hey man, like you want to slide, you want to contribute to this running back room where look, we threw to the running back a good bit at Florida. Like I'm making that selling point. Like that, yeah. Montreal Johnson was right near the top of our team in terms of targets and catches. Montreal Johnson had the third most targets on the team, third most catches on the team. I'm using that as a selling point, and I'm saying, hey, Justice Haynes, you're considered a versatile weapon. You're considered someone who can contribute on all three downs. You weren't used like that at Alabama, but we would use you like that. And I'm using that as a selling point. He was a depth running back, so that's why he wasn't used like that because, well, frankly, they had Jace McClellan, who is a pretty damn good receiving back. They have Roydell Williams as well. But I'm kicking the tires on anybody that even might be a flight risk at this point because we talked about it so many times. Of recruiting is about relationships. Recruiting is about relationships. It's about relationships. Yes, you're committing to the school in an ideal world. When you commit to Florida, you're committing to Florida. No matter who the head coach is. If there's a firing, there's a firing, but you're committed to Florida and you're going to stay there. This isn't an ideal world. It's the modern day transfer portal. And frankly, I don't think that it should be if I commit to Florida, then I'm staying to Florida. Because like as a fan, sure. But at the same time, we're looking at Alabama and we're salivating at the players that might consider leaving, that might maybe kind of consider leaving Alabama because Nick Saban has retired. We're salivating at that thought. And if Billy Napier were to retire, we'll say, Billy Napier were to retire tomorrow, then every player that left, you'd probably be like, how could you? You committed to Florida. That's not how things work, okay? That's not how things work in 2024. It's not how things work in 2023. You're committing to the coach that you think will put you in the best position to succeed. And right now, for like that's why relationships are so important. Right now, Alabama doesn't have that. Even if they do hire Dan Lanning immediately, who I do think Dan Lanning will eventually be the hire, might be later this week. But even if they do make that hire and it's Dan Lanning, there's a good deal or a good chance that he doesn't have that relationship with a lot of guys. Maybe defensively, maybe he has that with defensively since he was at Georgia before, and there's a decent chance that he, spent that time recruiting those guys for Georgia, and then now that he's at Alabama, he's gonna be like, all right, like this is This is what we're going to do here. We've got that relationship, but offensively, he doesn't have that relationship with guys. And that's where, again, relationships come in part, where relationships come into play. Oregon was recruiting good, great football players. However, they weren't really living in the Southeast when they were recruiting. Even with Dan Lanning there, they weren't really recruiting a ton in the Southeast. So Dan Lanning doesn't have that same relationship with a lot of these guys that are on Alabama's roster from the Southeast. So you go contact those guys, and if you're Billy Napier, and you go, hey man, like we recruited you, we know you, we've talked to you a lot. Come on down, buddy. Granted, you don't have Corey Raymond who recruited those DBs and spent that time, but you've still got Billy Napier there. You've still got Austin Armstrong there. He was in the room for those. You take the swing. You take the swing. And if you look at the offensive line and you go, hey, Kaden, do you like Rob Sale and Darnell Stapleton? And you get him to commit before you hopefully give him the boot when the contract expires. But for Florida, like, you have to kick the tires on these guys. I get it. Everyone's going to go, oh, tampering. Don't tamper this, that. Everyone's doing it. I promise you, Kirby Smart has contacted the best players already. And he's been like, hey, you want to come on down to Georgia and you want to be a Bulldog and you want to play this? I promise you it's happened. And if Florida wants to be serious about things, I'm not saying you have to get them, because I understand how difficult it might be to actually convince them to go, because you're essentially trying to get them to commit before they ever even hit the portal. But you got to at least kick the tires on guys. You got to at least give it a try to get these guys on your roster in what is a do or die year. And you contact the guys who it's like, hey, you're going to be here for one more year and then go to the NFL. Those guys that have 1 year before they can jump ship, you go, you're going to be here one more year and then go to the NFL. You ball out, it doesn't matter if I get fired. You make the play and you help me stay here. And that's the selling point. You got to get them to stay. You got to get them to commit. You got to get them to be Gators. You got to at least try to do it. You have to be more aggressive than you've been. And then we're going to talk now about the 2024 class, where you have to get in contact with them again. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but first we're going to get a quick word from FanDuel for you. Today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook, #1 in my wallet and #1 in my heart. The NFL regular season is done. Playoffs are this weekend. I can't wait. Super stoked. NBA has been incredible. There's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and it ain't close, buddy boy. The boost hit again last night, by the way, just so you know. It was Victor Wembanyama, Chet Holmgren, and Jamie Jack Jr. On the Miami Heat to all get 15 points. It cashed. It was a beautiful boost. I loved it. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place a $5 bet, whether you win or lose. $150 in bonus bets. I'm not turning down $150. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. And remember that FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. To wrap up today's show, we are indeed talking about this 2024 Alabama recruiting class. And I think it's very important to talk about, because of all the players that we've talked about and we've said, hey, Florida, go pursue them. These are genuinely the best players that you have a chance at getting. This is the best chance you have to actually make a change and move the needle for Florida. I mean, first off, let's start with Jamir Grimsley, because I think Jamir Grimsley is the most relevant, although I know a lot of people want to talk about Zay Mincy first. I think Jamir Grimsley is the most relevant one to talk about. Jamir Grimsley, 4-star corner out of Tampa Catholic, and he was down to Alabama and Florida, and even after he committed to Alabama, he was taking visits to Florida, and he was still open to Florida, and it was a genuine possibility that he was going to flip from Alabama to Florida. And when it came down to it, when Billy Napier got rid of Corey Raymond, when everything happened after the season, and Jamir Grimsley was still taking visits and Austin Armstrong was still going to visit him, it came down to what Jamir Grimsley said was basically that he was committing to Alabama because he knew that there wouldn't be any staff changes. That's what he said. And that's what many 2024 kids said, that the ones that asked about long-term, because Nick Saban's up there, 72 years old. When a lot of those guys asked, they were told that, hey, I'm going to be here. That's what they were told. And that's why they committed to Alabama. And that's why Jamir Grimsley said that he was sticking with his commitment to Alabama. Well, that didn't happen. And now, again, I'm not sure how it goes when you're enrolled, if classes haven't started yet, if you drop, withdraw, whatever that goes. If you got to hit the portal to do it, you have a 30-day window. All Alabama players have a 30-day window. And for Jamir Grimsley, you were told, hey, like, we're going to be here. And then before you even got unpacked and on the field, they're gone. So I think Jamir Grimsley is someone that Florida has to kick the tires on. And then we'll talk about Zay Mincy now, of another DB that he signed on early signing day, December 21st, I think it was. Signed on early signing day. Then announced on January 6th. So just a few days ago, he announced where he signed. And now his coach has retired. Zay Mincy's a corner, safety, whatever you want to call him. I think he could play both. But I look at both of them, and I'm like, all right, well, kick the tires, because both of them went to Alabama, frankly, to be coached by Nick Saban. That was a huge selling point. And then Nick left. And by the way, if I'm a player, and I don't know if Zay Mincy asked, but we know that Jamir Grimsley asked. If I'm a player and I ask a coach, hey man, are you gonna leave? Because I'm feeling this, because basically essentially what happened with Jamir Grimsley was that he was like, hey Nick, are you gonna be here? Because I'm kind of feeling Florida, but I want to go to the place that's got the more stable coaching staff. And Nick was like, hey buddy, yeah, we're gonna be here. Don't worry, we're gonna be there. Don't worry, we're gonna be here all 4 years. All 4 years, 5 years, hell, 6 years. And then not even a month after you sign, he's gone. I'm going to be really pissed. I like that. There's no other way to put it. I'm going to be really pissed. And it would not shock me to see some of these guys from the 2024 class bounce. We already saw, what was his name? Ryan Williams, I think, the receiver. That was committed to Alabama. He already left. Crystal balls are in for Auburn. Like, that's the expectation. I get it. People thought that he was going to go to Auburn before Nick Saban even retired, but decommitted right there and bounced out. And also a name that we talked a little bit about, Caleb Odom, last night in the live stream after Nick Saban announced his retirement. But also a name that I wanted to talk about was Peyton Woodyard, safety from St. John Bosco in California. And I want to talk about him because Will Harris, the Florida Gators secondary coach, defensive back coach from Cali, has clearly taken an interest in bringing California athletes to Gainesville. And so I would not shock me if Peyton Woodyard was a player that Florida, specifically Will Harris, reached out to. Because again, he's shown so much interest in looking at California players and kind of expanding Florida's blueprint to the West Coast. Will Harris has shown that he wants to do that. Wouldn't shock me if Peyton Woodyard, if he is going to kind of turn his head elsewhere, if Florida kicked the tires on him. I know it came down to Bama, Georgia. Wouldn't shock me if that's what happened. If Will Harris kind of was like, hey man, like, you're already coming southeast. At least I'm from Cali. We get that bond, that connection, that we have, that touch of home there. Come be great and come be a Gator. So Florida, there's opportunity here. Like it doesn't knock frequently. Opportunity like this doesn't knock frequently. If there's a chance to make a play, you got to make a play, Florida. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We'll be back tomorrow. Brian Smith talks some recruiting 2025 early look. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Whole Nine Sports, Giants Century NFL 33. And I'll see you all tomorrow.